Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Eric Wesoff, who's a prominent industry journalist, analyst, consultant, speaker, and expert witness in the renewable energy field. He's currently the editorial director at Canary Media and recently served as senior editor for solar publication PV Magazine. Prior to that, he was editor-in-chief at green technology market analysis and media firm Greentech Media. And he has an article at Canary Media, Will the Biden Administration Let One Company Kill U.S. Solar? Welcome to Background Briefing, Eric Wesoff.
Thanks, Ian. Good to be here.
So, Eric, the answer to your question, will the Biden administration let one country kill U.S. solar, appears to be that yesterday the White House announced that they're authorizing the Defense Production Act to spur U.S. manufacturing of solar, and that they were basically, what would you call it, a 2-year moratorium in the Commerce Department's tariff probe.
Moratorium's a good word. A pause, kicking the can down the lane a little bit. But yes, some of the tension and conflict has been pulled out of this story for now. But the major issues still remain despite this pause, and this pause allows the solar industry to restart after a 6-month paralyzation of the market. But some of the themes that are involved here are, how are we going to have a energy transition and move from fossil fuels to other sources without a domestic industrial complex to build these things? Does our dependence on China for solar panels simply give us a new energy master instead of Saudi Arabia or the Mideast for oil? Now we're dependent on Asia for our energy transition.
Right, and you can look at Europe and Germany being dependent on Russia for its oil and gas, and you see where that leads to. So how do we get in a situation where a small company that seems to be moribund, I believe they haven't made any solar panels since 2017, and yet they were able to paralyze the entire U.S. solar industry, albeit largely dependent upon imports from the 4 countries, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, that the suit alleges we're using components from China that should be subject to U.S. tariffs, and that is why this tiny little company in San Jose called Oxin was able to basically stop the U.S. solar business in its tracks.
Well, it's a painful idiosyncrasy of our trade policy, as it were, that any company can petition the Commerce Department for a cause. And in this case, Oxin, this rather inconsequential solar company based in San Jose, made this legal petition. And the result was that a tariff, the potential of a tariff, hung over the industry, and it made it uncompetitive for the last 6 months. Now, it would be nice to have a domestic solar production happening to support our high-growth solar industry, but we don't. We've given that away to China. And Oxin, this tiny solar company in San Jose, is making this tariff threat as a way to bring back the solar industry to the United States by inflicting tariffs on other countries. But the real issue here is, do tariffs work? And I'm paraphrasing a colleague in my industry, but tariffs have never worked. I'm answering my question, forgive me. Have not worked since the beginning of time. And the only result of a tariff is not the intended consequence. The only result of tariffs typically is to raise prices for the consumer. And that's all that's done. A tariff on solar panels has simply raised the price of solar power to Americans. It hasn't resulted in the rebirth of an American solar industry. So an energy transition cannot happen in the United States without importing materials from China. In the meantime, while we grow that business, Biden has taken steps with the Defense Procurement Act and some other incentives that he's going to be launching. They haven't been articulated completely, that will attempt to grow a manufacturing hub, a solar manufacturing complex in the United States.
And again, I'm speaking with Eric Wesoff, who's a prominent industry journalist, analyst, consultant, speaker, and expert witness in the renewable energy field. He's currently the editorial director at Canary Media and recently served as senior editor for solar publication PV Magazine. And prior to that, he was editor-in-chief at green technology market analysis and media firm Greentech Media. And he has an article at Canary Media, Will the Biden Administration Let One Company Kill U.S. Solar? So is this really a case of the solar industry shooting itself in the foot, or is there some other sort of malign interest in this? Because obviously, if you're against alternative energy, and I believe we still, as taxpayers, subsidize fossil fuel industries, and we know that Joe Manchin, who's in the coal business, has scuttled the Build Back Better plan, and he's the head of the Energy Committee on the Senate, and he's, obviously promoting fossil fuels. So there is that powerful lobby out there. Do they have a hand in any of this? Because without being conspiratorial, it sort of suggests that a small, obscure company in California has stopped a big part of alternative energy, which is solar.
Yes, there's been rumors and speculation, and that's all that there is, of some eminent degree, some nefarious sponsor of this petition, whether it be oil and gas companies, whether it be domestic solar companies, or whether it be JFK Jr. and the Illuminati. We've looked into it as deeply as we can and can't find some dark hand steering this. So I have to take this as, it's easy to be conspiratorial, and certainly it would serve oil and gas interests if there was not a viable solar industry in the United States. But in this case, you can take it at face value that a somewhat less than competitive solar company has no way of competing on its merits, but simply has to do it through trade and commerce efforts rather than building a better or cheaper solar panel. So I'd like to be able to give you a good conspiratorial answer, but I cannot.
So then, dealing with the facts, why is it that the U.S. can't produce solar panels competitively?
Well, the United States can't produce iPhones competitively either. We are not a nation that's good at competing globally on extractive industries. That's not our place in an advanced late-stage capitalist nation. And so the United States is going to have to invest billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, in order to create a domestic industry that rivals the current Chinese solar industry. The United States has probably 8 gigawatts of solar capacity. That China and Asia probably has 300 to 400 gigawatts of solar capacity. We are just a rounding error in world production of solar, and we've given it away over the last couple of decades because we don't have a cogent industrial policy in the United States.
But the countries that we're talking about, which are Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, they're new to the solar business, and how come they're more competitive than we are?
Again, having an industrial policy where nations subsidize land and electricity use in order to power those factories is not something the United States has. We also have, obviously, the highest labor rates in some of the highest labor rates in the world. You can't build a solar factory in Germany any more than you can build an iPhone factory in Germany. It's just, it's not just the solar industry; it's every industry. We have to accept that imports are part of the United States making the transition away from fossil fuels until we can launch with a cogent industrial policy, a real manufacturing core. Whether or not it makes sense to do that, I'll leave to economists and politicians.
Well, obviously the labor standards are pretty low Vietnam, Malaysia, and
yes,
Thailand,
as well as their environmental standards.
Sure.
So,
but what will then invoking the Defense Production Act do to spur U.S. solar manufacturing?
It's going to have to entail grants and incentives in order to build a domestic solar panel industry. Or he's also the Biden administration is also talking about using the Defense Production Act to build heat pumps so that we can electrify residential and commercial heating and move away from gas heating. So it's the electrification of the home. These are both noble goals, but again, it's about bringing mass production, millions of pieces, and along with all the support components that go with it, in order to build an industry that can actually produce heat pumps and solar panels in the United States. It's uncharted territory. The Defense Production Act was used for baby formula, I think, recently. It's not something that's been invoked by the executive branch very often. So it's uncharted territory.
Well, it's not just solar panels and energy efficient heat pumps. The Defense Production Act also wants to spur building insulation, electric transformers needed for the power grid, and equipment like electrolyzers and fuel cells. So it's an ambitious transfer to alternative energy. But we know, for example, that if Donald Trump comes back, I'm sure it'll be killed, stopped in its tracks. And he has some peculiar obsession about wind turbines. So, I mean, we lost 4 years in terms of global warming under Trump, and it'll be the end of any attempt to stop global warming if he comes back. So we are at a very critical point here. Do you get the impression that the solar industry can sort of stop fighting amongst itself? I mean, for example, Senator Sherrod Brown and Rob Portman from Ohio, they both support this petition to the Commerce Department by Oxen, the small company that's paralyzed the American solar industry.
They both see it as a jobs. They want solar as a jobs creation engine. They also happen to be the senators of states that house one of the few U.S. domestic solar production success stories, a company called First Solar. So the fact that they both came from one state and First Solar is headquartered in that state is not a coincidence. First Solar is one of the few large-scale, gigawatt-scale solar production companies that has a domestic base.
So why is First Solar a success, and a company like Oxen that's behind this petition that's paralyzed the industry a failure?
That's a many-layered. There's a many-layered answer, but First Solar has been a success using a non-silicon technology. Everything we've talked about in terms of solar modules uses silicon as a technology. First Solar is an American technology success story. They've managed to make what's known as thin film solar marketable and producible at a competitive rate, but it's a vastly different technology than that used by the Chinese. It uses a substance called cadmium telluride as the photovoltaic material, as opposed to silicon. So they're sort of an isolate. They're a population of one that has managed to create an ecosystem around their particular idiosyncratic material.
But does it work, Eric?
Oh, it certainly works. It certainly works. It's photovoltaic and it's economical. And in fact, one of the advantages that First Solar has over the other manufacturers is that it's the energy needed to produce a First solar panel is much less than that to create a conventional Chinese-made solar panel. So First Solar, again, is a American technology success story in terms of its commercializing an idiosyncratic material and making it both efficiently from an energy standpoint and from a cost standpoint. I don't know if this can be emulated or replicated to create an American solar domination, but it is an example that it can be done in the United States.
Well, I thank you for joining us. I mean, for filling us in on this puzzling story, which at least the self-inflicted wound on the solar industry has been alleviated for 2 years. But it does sound like if we have an American success story, it would make sense to build on it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And there are other companies who, with a little bit of incentive, can create a domestic solar industry, but it's going to require consistent long-term thinking by our government. And that's, as you've mentioned, a new president can sweep all of these changes under the rug. So it requires consistent long-term industrial policy, not something the United States has excelled at in its last couple of 100 years.
Well, Eric Wesoff, I thank you so much for joining us here today.
Ian, thank you very much.
And again, I've been speaking with Eric Westoff, who's a prominent industry journalist, analyst, consultant, speaker, and expert witness in the renewable energy field. He's currently the editorial director at Canary Media and recently served as a senior editor for solar publication PV Magazine. And prior to that, he was editor-in-chief at green technology market analysis and media firm Greentech Media. And he has an article at Canary Media, Will the Biden administration let one company kill U.S.